Now our next topic of discussion is input-output interference. Whenever any peripheral device, that is either an input device or an output device like your monitor, keyboard, mouse, printer, whatsoever, when we are going to connect with the CPU, there is a difference of communication between them because the input-output organization of computer depends upon the size of computer and the peripheral connected to it. Input-output system of computer provide an efficient mode of communication between the central system and the outside environment, because CPU is the central system of the computer, and whatever the device we are going to connect with the computer are the external. So from the for these external units, with the communication with the CPU, make it easier with the help of input output interference. So the input output interference make it easier for them, the easier, because there is a difference between them. The differences are: peripheral are electromechanical and electromagnetic devices, and the CPU and the memory are electronic device. Therefore a conversion of signal values may be needed. Yes, this is the major difference, that the peripheral devices are electromechanical and electromagnetic device, while on the other hand the CPU and the memory is electronic device. So there is a difference between the signal values. So these values, signals must be converted into another signal. That's why there is a need of input output interference. The data transfer rate of peripheral is usually slower than the transfer rate of CPU, and consequently synchronization mechanism is to be needed. Obviously there is a difference between the speed of data transmission. All the electronic device, the data transmission speeds is very faster. So CPU speed is very faster as compared to the peripheral connected to it. So in order to make a mechanism so that the transferring become easier, there is a synchronization is to be needed. That's why there is a need of input output interference. Third one, the data codes and the format in peripheral differ from the word format as in CPU and memory. So these are the basic three reasons. That's why there is a need of input output interference is to be needed. So in order to resolve this difference between the peripheral and the CPU, there is a need of input output interference. So input output buses and interface model. It depends upon typical link between the processor and the several peripheral. Input output bus consists of data lines, address line and control lines. Actually what happens in case of peripheral device, the data and the addresses are carried out by the various buses. Buses are the major carrier of the data to the peripheral devices. So that's why there is a need of bus system that is attached to the peripheral. They are actually communicating whatever the information or the instruction that is generated by the CPU for the peripheral. So communicate with the particular device, the processor place a device address on address line. Each interface decode the address and control received from input output bus, interpret them for peripheral and provide signal on peripheral control. It is also synchronize the data flow and supervise the transfer between the peripheral and the processor. Each peripheral has its own control. For example, printer controller control the paper motion, printing time, and control lines are referred as input output command. The commands that is given are control command, status command, data output command, data input command. So the various types of commands that is managed by the input output interference in order to manage the peripheral devices. That is what elaborate connection of input output buses or input output device to the processor. Now as the diagram shows, there are three types of buses: data, address and control. There is an interface between the various peripheral devices like the keyboard, display terminal, printer, magnetic disc. So the interference is the major portion of this actual work, who communicate with this with the help of interface. So the processor can easily communicate with this peripheral with the help of interface. To communicate with input output, the processor must communicate with the memory unit. Like input output buses, the memory buses contain the data, address and read-write control line. There are three ways the computer buses can be used to communicate with the memory and input output device used, and the various buses that is to be used with that is to store the information. So that is what the interface works out in order to perform the communication with the devices. Thank you.